Over, I can't remember.
Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. The protocol that we use in council, in committee, is that the acting mayor for that month, or that 6 weeks, chairs the committee meeting, and we'll ask Councillor Craig Hodge to chair the meeting. At some point, we'll be dealing with 3 statutory reports on the finance side, and I will take over the chair for that portion of the meeting. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, good. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I have not received any other business items in advance of this meeting.
Okay, with the agenda.
Item 1 is a presentation from the General Manager Finance and Technology and the Manager Corporate Planning. It's the 2016 annual report, and we have opportunities for public input.
Yes, I am there. Okay, sorry, I guess we're starting right off.
Yeah, I assumed the presentations. I wasn't looking at the order. So I will be the chair.
Get with your game.
Oh, is this on? Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hunt.
It's my pleasure to be here with Graham Stewart, our Manager of Corporate Planning, to present Council and the public with the City's 2016 annual report. As you know, the City has an integrated planning framework which includes our strategic plan, our business plan, and our financial plan. And this report provides the results of the previous year relative to all of these plans. While Graham and I are here to present this report, it reflects the decisions of Council, the hard work of staff, the contributions from our numerous volunteers and community organizations, and the achievement of a number of great initiatives, as well as the ongoing activities of the organization. I'd just like to quickly recognize the teams that have been instrumental in putting this document together, and that's our financial services team, and I have Daniela Roman from Finance here, corporate planning, and most importantly, corporate communications, who puts this wonderful document together for us. While this is a statutory requirement, for many years we've also been applying to the Government Finance Officers Association for the reporting of this information and have received awards on this document. We try and make it readily accessible by providing not only the comprehensive one that everybody sees here, but also a shortened version or a financial annual report highlights. I'd just like to mention, you just noted why are we doing the presentation up front. This is the public, under the community charter, the public does have an opportunity to ask questions or provide submissions on the annual report, and so we're going to do the presentation first, and then committee will receive my report later on in the agenda. All right. So, as I mentioned previously, this report includes the results of 2016 from the 3 instrumental plans that the City uses to carry out its work, and that's the strategic plan, the business plan, and the financial plan. The annual report also includes our audited consolidated financial statements, the supporting schedules, and a variety of statistical analysis and information that we use to measure our progress and our achievements, and that's at the back of the document. So I'm now going to turn it over to Graham, who's going to discuss the first 2 plans.
Thanks, Michelle. So this afternoon I'm going to talk a little bit about our accomplishments related to the 2016 business plan priorities, as well as the strategic plan. As you know, the City of Coquitlam strategic plan has 5 goals for the City of Coquitlam. This leads us towards 2019. Those 5 goals form the basis of our planning, performance measures, and annual business plan priorities and financial planning. You'll notice that many of the initiatives presented today are in different phases of development and may have shifted from one department to another for implementation, depending on the timeline involved. While this is an annual report, much of our planning is done in multi-year phases, from conception to planning to implementation to finalization. 2016 was a very exciting year. Many high-profile long-term projects were completed, and it was a busy year for council, for staff, and for the community. Suffice to say, I think we should all be very proud of the work that was completed in 2016. The projects and work I'm highlighting today are exactly that. They're highlights. This isn't a comprehensive list, but all that information is contained in the annual report. So, without further ado, Our first goal is to strengthen neighborhoods. This is a goal that seeks to have a community comprised of safe, green, and inclusive neighborhoods that are connected and foster a sense of belonging. Items from the 2016 plan that support this goal were considerable work and public consultation was completed on the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan, culminating with a draft plan at the end of 2016. Enhancements along the Pine Tree Way corridor were finished, including walkability and cycling infrastructure improvements. We finished construction of the Town Centre Park Plaza, which was used for the first time on Canada Day. Implementation of the housing affordability strategy continued. Approximately 1,300 rental units were under application at the end of 2016. We held the Coquitlam 125 anniversary celebrations throughout 2016, highlighting the city's history, culture, and heritage through numerous public events, sharing of stories, and public art pieces. And the city hosted the 2016 55-plus BC Games with 3,200 athletes and over 1,200 volunteers, promoting physical activity, sport, and sport tourism. Our next goal is about expanding jobs and prosperity and seeks to secure a vibrant and local economy. To that end, a review of the city's liquor bylaws was completed, allowing for new types of businesses to operate within the city of Coquitlam. Economic Development held 121 business retention and expansion meetings, 145 business attraction meetings, and completed 443 requests for assistance, enhancing Coquitlam's economic base. Engineering staff worked with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and the City of New Westminster on options to improve the Brunette interchange. The Tourism Office worked and participated in a variety of events which attracted visitors to Coquitlam. These include the BC Highland Games, the Canadian Collegiate National Men's Volleyball Championship, and the Festival du Bois, just to name a few.
Thank you.
We held the free winter lights display at Lafarge Lake, where an estimated attendance of 100,000 walked the 1 kilometer loop. And 11 pieces of public art were installed across the city's 4 SkyTrain stations. Also as part of the Coquitlam 125 celebrations, local artists painted 12 salmon sculptures that were installed in locations throughout the city. The next goal focuses on increasing active participation and creativity to sustain a healthy community that includes physical, spiritual, and social wellness for our residents. Significant work was completed on the implementation strategy for the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan. We piloted the Park Host program, organizing volunteers to welcome visitors to Coquitlam's parks and providing information related to nature interpretation and shared park use. As part of the Coquitlam 125 celebrations, 128 block parties were held, and over $18,000 was distributed in block party grants. The environmental review for the Coquitlam River Forest Management Plan was initiated, and improvements to cycling and sidewalk infrastructure were made as part of the school walkability and sidewalk programs to encourage citizens to consider walking as an alternative to driving. We also made good progress on our goal of building capacity and capability to deliver high-quality services that are socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. Significant work was completed to finalize the terms of the Master Joint Use Agreement with School District 43. The solid waste management and vector control bylaws were substantially updated to better address current needs and provide for appropriate enforcement. We continued to see a diversion rate of above 70%, resulting in nearly 1/3 of a ton of solid waste per household, and that's below the 5-year average. Significant progress was made on the condition assessment of park infrastructure and the creation of a holistic asset management plan. And over $500,000 was provided in total grants to the community to promote events and experiences, including over $485,000 in Spirit of Coquitlam grants. So our final goal is to achieve excellence in city governance through a strong governance model that is based on the principles of openness, fairness, and accountability, and that ensures informed decision-making throughout the organization. To this end, over 140,000 online transactions were completed, including dog license renewals, utility bill payments, and bylaw enforcement payments. 143 residents and organization representatives volunteered on the city's 11 advisory boards and committees, providing input and advice on a wide range of city programs and policies. The Welcome to Coquitlam event was expanded to include 16 external agencies. Over 500 attendees participated to learn information on all facets of our community. And, my personal favorite, through the Staff Committee on Business Improvement, and Customer Service, 58 items were completed that enhanced the customer experience and reduced red tape. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll pass you back to Michelle to talk about some of the financial aspects of the report.
Thank you, Graham. So as I mentioned, the third plan within our integrated planning framework is the financial plan, and I'll just briefly touch on the financial highlights as represented by our consolidated financial statements. These were audited by KPMG, our auditor. Overall, we've had an incredibly positive year. Our assets increased, our debts decreased. We achieved a surplus in all our funds, including our general fund and our utility funds, and we obtained an unqualified audit opinion. Looking at our balance sheet, we have approximately $1.86 billion in tangible capital assets, and they increased on a net basis of about $40 million over 2015. There were new additions of $85 million, primarily in lands, roads, and $26 million of that was contributed through development. This was offset by capital asset amortization and some disposals. We also hold liabilities in the form of debt. We purchased debt through the Municipal Finance Authority, and these debt has been acquired to finance a variety of infrastructure projects over the years. Our debt payments are approximately $1 million per year, and we have outstanding debt of about $20 million, which may look like a lot, but when you compare that to our assets, it's quite little, actually. On a cash and temporary investment perspective, we had an increase of just over $100 million from 2015, and this is primarily related to our reserves, which I'm going to speak to in a couple of slides, but really resulting from land sale transactions. We also hold money that we collect from developers, such as DCCs that fund future capital projects, or tax prepayments, deposits for land sale transactions. So those are monies that are restricted, and we can't use them for sort of general purposes. We also have a number of operating reserves, which we keep to fund those years where we need to, such as the extreme weather and our harsh winter this past year. Those are reserves that help us in the years where our budget doesn't cover those types of expenses. So overall, our net worth is about $2.2 billion, and 85% of this is held in our capital assets. That's roads, utility infrastructure, all the pipes, and for water, sewer, drainage, as well as our buildings. We also have reserves for operations, which I mentioned previously. Here's a breakdown of the reserves. We have three different types of reserves, and they increased by $77 million over 2015. $64 million of that, though, was related to our land sales. We also increased reserves to manage the asset replacement of the $1.86 billion worth of infrastructure that we have. That presents a large challenge for us, and we have to keep continually funding that, and we have money set aside to do that. The next three slides are included in the annual report statistical analysis section and the highlights. The first one is looking at our revenues. So about 64% is broken down, is covered by taxation and fees and charges, and those are things like when people pay to use our pools and our arenas, things for inspection, fees for inspections, and those kinds of charges. We also recognize the revenue from land sales, as well as development contributions. This is our expenditures broken down by function. So approximately sort of a quarter, and a quarter. So for the first quarter, just over is our for police, fire, and other protection. The second quarter is providing services for water, sewer, and solid waste. And the third quarter is for parks, recreation, and culture services. The rest is for things like planning and development, all the support services such as human resources, finance, that supports the operations of the city. And the third one, that is third chart that's included in the highlights, is looking at our expenses by account. We are a people-driven organization. All of our services require people, and so it makes sense that just over 40% of our expenditures are related to wages and salaries and benefits. 24% is related to supplies and equipment, and that's primarily within the roads area, things like gravel and asphalt and sand and salt and all the supplies that they need to manage the roads. amortization, and then contracted services is primarily our contract with the RCMP to provide policing services. On a trimester basis, we report to Council our operating budget to actual variance, and so this is the results at the end of the year on that operating basis. It takes out the capital asset amortization, which is included in the financial statements. Under those rules, we have to include it. So this compares with what you see on a trimester basis. So overall, there was a net surplus of about $700,000, and that was after a contribution to our infrastructure reserve, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The variances were primarily related to labor savings, especially at the beginning of last year. We did have vacancies across the organization. Parks, Recreation and Culture was the one area that was showing a bit of a deficit, and that was related to the hazardous tree mitigation risk assessment and mitigation work that they had to undertake last year that was a bit of a surprise. The infrastructure reserve, I just want to highlight this as this, the financial statements show that we have about $12.5 million in our infrastructure reserve. However, Council's allocated some of this infrastructure reserve to things like the Southwest Park Blitz that is ongoing. We're replacing parks, playground and park infrastructure in 10 of our parks, Rochester Park. So there are particular projects that come up through the years where we've committed some of this money for asset replacement and renewal. So currently there's an uncommitted balance of approximately $3 million. So overall, it was a very busy year, both in terms of our strategic and our business plans. We accomplished a lot, particularly around the 125th anniversary celebrations. And we finished the year in a very strong financial position. And I think we continue to uphold the council policies that put us in a good financial position to maintain that long-term sustainability. And I'll open it up for, I think at this point, for questions.
Go. Okay, so we've got a council. Thank you very much for the presentation. We've got we'll open with Councillor Hodge's question.
Yeah, just are we looking for questions in that now, because the report is sort of broken. You've got the rest of the report following later, so I didn't know what you were looking for.
I think at this point it's open to the public to make any comments or questions, and then later when we come back with the report and you receive the report, that's when you can ask your
I have questions about this, but they're covered in the report, so I can save them and ask
as part of the report.
Part of the report.
Okay. There's still an opportunity for any council members to have clarifying questions if they need to.
Yes.
And we'll, seeing none. Okay. This was advertised as pursuant to the legislation that governs us, that verbal submissions could be provided at the meeting. Today, this is our annual report. For council's benefit, you all have this year's annual report. I brought the last two annual reports as well, in case anyone wanted to make reference to any of those sorts of things to inform your questions for later. So we'll open the floor. This was published in the local paper and on the city's website. So, are there any presentations from any members of the public, or questions or comments? Anything at all? Okay, we'll proceed then. Councillor Hodge.
Yes. The next item.
Said you had questions.
No, I said no. My questions were I was going to ask later. So at the report, because the report is here.
Clarification.
So, yeah, I just wanted clarification. My questions are pertinent to the report as well as this, so I thought I'd just ask them all at once.
Okay, very well. So back to you then.
So back to me as chair.
Who's on first?
Yes, we'll get it figured. It was just.
I'm Irish.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Well, he's the one who put his hand up.
Clerk, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 2 is the minutes of the council and committee meeting held on Monday, May 29th. Recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Any questions? All in favor? Good, that's carried.
Item 3 is a delegation from Jordan Piercy, Catherine Coombe, and Timon Asmir. They will be speaking to the Park Ridge Estates household against the extension of Oxford Street.
Welcome. You can come up to the front here. There's a microphone here. And if there's three of you, we can squeeze one more chair in here for you. Here, we got an extra one here today.
Nisha's moving for us. Thank you.
Nisha, we can bring three up here. It's good. Yeah. Okay. Okay, welcome. As per our policy, you'll have 5 minutes, and after that, there may be questions in addition to your presentation. Thank you.
Sounds good. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for the opportunity to attend the meeting today and talk about what's important to us. We represent the Oxford Street Extension Community Opposition Group, and we're very passionate about our cause. On March 20th, actually I'm just going to move to the next slide. On March 20th, the petition Parkridge Estates Households Against the Extension of Oxford Street was submitted to Mayor and Council. 94% of households signed the petition. We spoke directly with many of the households who signed the petition, and we heard their concerns about how they would be negatively impacted. We can tell you these families are very concerned about safety. Oxford is steep, curvy, and narrow, and many vehicles, including large RVs, boats, and trailers, park along the street. Extending Oxford to connect now with 950 housing units in the proposed Hazel Coy area would result in thousands of daily vehicle trips up and down Oxford, in addition to the traffic generated by the nearly 200 houses plus rental suites in Parkridge Estates alone. For example, due to blind curves and fast-moving traffic, residents have mentioned it's difficult to make a left turn out of driveways or connecting roads to head down Oxford towards David. There's real fear that the current difficult left turns will become dangerous left turns. It's evident that Oxford, above David, was not originally designed to safely handle the amount of traffic that would come from the extension. We attended the two Northwest Burke Vision community information sessions on June 1st and 3rd, and heard many residents expressing their opposition to the Oxford extension. We've also heard from residents who live on Oxford and connecting roads below David Avenue, who expressed that the majority of cars speed excessively down Oxford, despite the speed limits of 30 and 50 kilometers an hour. To us, it's very apparent the city has not taken appropriate steps to ensure speed limits are obeyed and safety ensured along this stretch of Oxford. So there's little confidence among residents that appropriate steps would be taken to ensure safety and speed control in the event Oxford is extended. Speaking with the city's planning, engineering, and transportation managers, potential alternatives to extending Oxford were identified. First, the Northwest Burke Vision study, transportation discussion paper, explicitly mentions on page 23 that traffic levels are not expected to reach the city's two-way annual daily traffic volume threshold for arterial streets, meaning Coast Meridian has more than enough capacity to handle all vehicle traffic in and out of the Northwest Burke Vision area. A secondary access road is simply not needed. However, a better alternative to extending Oxford is to build a bridge across Hyde Creek, connecting sub-area C1 to Princeton Avenue or Highland Drive. And from there, traffic could connect either directly to Coast Meridian or down David via Glenbrook. And the nice thing about Glenbrook is it's wide and has potential to be further widened. And compared to Oxford, it has minimal grade and is mostly straight. As noted in the transportation discussion paper, this alternative would be in line with current city practices, since it would provide a parallel route to and alleviate congestion on Coast Meridian, and provide another emergency access route. A third alternative is to do the same as was done at the top of Glenbrook Street. Install gating or removable bollards at the end of Oxford with through access granted for only emergency vehicles. So in conclusion, and to ensure our message to Mayor and Council is clear, we are not opposing the development of the Northwest Burke Vision, including the Hazel Coy area. But primary, if not all access, should be made via Coast Meridian. There are better alternatives to extending Oxford Street. We respectfully ask that you eliminate the Oxford extension from your plans, find a better, safer solution, and consider that 94% of residents directly impacted oppose your plans. We believe citizens would be surprised and appalled if Mayor and Council were to ignore the voices of so many residents, particularly when safety is such a great concern. This is just a great opportunity to show citizens and the media that the City of Coquitlam is listening. We look forward to continued dialogue over the coming months and years. Please don't underestimate us. Again, we really appreciate the opportunity, and we thank you for your time.
Okay, and I thank you for sticking to the 5 minutes, because I know this is an important issue for you. I'll take questions, beginning with Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. You made one statement that I'd like to see if we can get clarification from the city's engineer about. You said that Oxford was not originally designed to handle the traffic that an extension would generate. And that's a very specific factual question, and I want to know from our engineer if he has the background on that. Mr.
Through the chair, we have looked into the history of the subject roadway, and we found that in the early 90s, the existing sections north of David were built in 2 different phases, and there is clear indication on the design drawings that they were designed and built for the collector standard of the day, and that they would be capable of and were designed for further extension in the future.
So, thank you. So I'll ask the presenter then, where did you get your information that they were not originally designed to handle an extension?
Yeah, when the design plans were put in place, was consideration given that many households in Parkridge Estates would have tenants who would have extra vehicles other than the one family housing. Now many of these houses, you have tenants down below in basement suites, which further adds to the traffic. And furthermore, my experience comes primarily from living in Parkridge Estates and just seeing the traffic.
It was based on your observations about the traffic levels now, and just thinking that it wouldn't. So technically, it was designed and built for collector standards. So it's part of the information that we're going to have to weigh your concerns with all the technical information when we do make a decision on this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have Councillor Reid next.
Thank you. Well, as someone who has been around here since 1984, except for between 93 and 98 when your infamous road was built, I know quite a bit about the road, and I have just had something sent to me that even predated me, which was up to 1972, about the Coy Street, how they were going to build some houses and they had to redo the housing because they knew that eventually Oxford would be joined up into the Hazel somewhere. And I mean, that's what, 30, 40 years ago, 40 plus years ago. So, I guess in the early 90s, when I was still around, I remember the people down Oxford, just above the cemetery where that was built, and all the way down Oxford, I remember a huge bunch of them coming in. We don't want anybody. They didn't want your subdivision. They didn't want anything to do with it. And we realized that sometimes this happens, and the subdivision was built anyhow, and again at a collector standard. And we knew that someday that everyone who lived up there, all the realtors were very aware, and the developers, that it was always intended to be a through road, always. So I have to say, back in the mid-90s when it was built, there was more discussion about it, I know that. What's concerning me is some of the things that you've told me, that RVs, boats, and trailers are parked on the roads. So I think we better get a bylaw enforcement officer out there, because that is not allowed. And if they're speeding, that's something that can go to the RCMP, and they can deal with it, because that's supposedly not allowed either. This is a really hard time in this city. All the years I've been around, it's hard because we are developing, adding on, and redeveloping, and changes is about to be underway. And no matter how we try, we have to accept some traffic. And this council has been so aware of trying to get people to park their boats and trailers and extra cars and relatives where they're supposed to be parked and not taking up all the spots on the street. I think I have to stay with the plan there is now, unless engineering comes forward with something better. And I know you've had a couple of alternatives, and I think we're all open to looking at something new. But as far as I'm concerned at this point, that road was always the road, and it will be. And I guess it will be upgraded as we go along, and they do whatever's popular now in the 2000s and not what was popular in the 1990s. But no one can say they didn't know that the road was a through road, because it's been there since someone up in that neighborhood sent me something today, which I passed on to planning and engineering from 1972. So it's always been the road. And that doesn't mean my mind is closed. It never has been. But I'm willing to look at whatever the engineers come up with, but that has been the plan. So, but I love to see you come in, and I love to see people stand up for what they believe in. And sometimes it works, and sometimes we may tweak it. We'll do what we can. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, with that said, engineering will in fact take steps to evaluate some of the alternatives that we've proposed. Then is that realistic?
I think personally, from my standpoint, the road is what it is. If there's alternatives that the city thinks would enhance what we've got, we have a really progressive engineering department here, so they're always coming up with new things like traffic bulges, which I absolutely hate. But so be it. I have to live with them.
Okay. I've got myself and then Mayor Stewart. One of the things that, and I was years ago was involved with the traffic calming committee here in Coquitlam. And one of the challenges was it was very hard to go into neighborhoods and make changes after the fact. But given that this could be considered a new neighborhood, I would like engineering that if this is deemed to be the preferred route, to see if we could implement things such as traffic circles like we used on Sobol, which is a collector route. And if that's the case, to make sure that they go in before construction, because as soon as you put them in, everybody who uses the road complains. The people who live there love them, but the people who use the road don't. And one of the things that we did on Burke Mountain is that before the homes were put in, traffic circles were put in at Princeton and Marguerite, Highland and Marguerite, Sobol, and I think it's Roxton. And I think that if this is deemed the only alternative, that we really need to look at some traffic calming through there, because I think you are correct. Obviously, there will be an increase in traffic, but I think to your point, there are going to be more secondary suites, and we're finding that all through the city now. And I think your point in that case is well taken. That if this is the route, and I have an open mind to it, of course, but if that's the case, I think we have to look at some mitigating factors as well. So it's not just this is the solution. So I think that may be part of the discussion that you've alluded to is, other things that can be done. So I'll just pass that on to engineering, traffic planning, that maybe that is part of the ongoing work on this, that we can consider those options as well. I have Mayor Stewart and then Councillor Asmunsen.
Thank you. As other councillors have said, thank you very much for coming in. We do like to hear from residents. Our challenge, of course, is we inherit. It sounds like nobody on this council was there at the time the road was built, but we all, one of us dated that event. I was trying to be kind.
Helping you out there.
And so we all try to contemplate what was envisioned. And typically, if there's a yellow line down the middle, it's a collector. If there's no line, it's narrower and it's a local road. And local road means you park one on each side, you can't pass two. Collector, if you park one on each side, you can still pass two without crossing the yellow. So there are collectors like Sobol, for example, which is the infamous collector that winds, or Leclerc near where I live, where one of the turns is very, very sharp. It takes place over two properties, a 45-degree turn. Foot of Mundy is almost a right angle on a collector. road on a bus route. And so you'll find that the road design curve issues, let's look at Thermal or Gatonsbury. There are collectors called Snake Hill. There's an arterial called Snake Hill. So we inherit these road conditions in many cases, and so we're looking at this one, and I think it's generally agreed that this has always been intended to go through. I look at the top of it and I see not a bulb made of sidewalk and concrete curb, but rather a bulb that's not finished yet, which always implies to me that, well, it's sidewalk all the way up to a point, and then they didn't continue the sidewalk in the bulb shape. They stopped the sidewalk and they made the circle so that fire trucks could turn around on a temporary basis. So I know in my heart that the thing that obviously was intended to go through, or they would have completed the road up there. So we're challenged by those kinds of issues, and so at the end of it all, I suspect that engineering always looks at the options that are presented and examines them and sees whether that's something they hadn't considered yet, or whether it's something that could add to the mix or replace a particular configuration. Because I know them, they come up with some creative ideas, but in the end. There's no question in my mind that it was intended to go through. So now our challenge is, how do we make it so that if it does go through, we mitigate the kinds of issues that it causes. But we know of lots and lots of places where the property owners that fought for the road extension then fight against the road extension because it's not their property anymore. And so I realize that wasn't you, but there is always some future reality associated with the decisions that we make today, and quite often, in fact, we put up the sign that says future arterial because we want to make sure that everyone that no one is confused about what the intent of this. It wouldn't have applied here because obviously this is not meant to be an arterial. But again, I thank you very much for coming in. We've got some consideration to make of the issues you've presented, and I appreciate it.
Councillor Rasmussen.
Thank you for your presentation. I live in Burke Mountain. I live in below Lower Sobol. Sobol, when I moved in there, was not even designed or considered as a collector road. It's now a collector road. And it's going to go right from Harper all the way down to Victoria, even longer than what your collector road would be. And, for all the fears that people had, it's not that big of a deal with the traffic. We have a school at the bottom also, which drives more traffic than what you would have here, because in and out of the area. So I think the fears about the amount of traffic, you may think it's that, but I don't think it's is that bad as what you look at. We will look at other options, and staff will look at them. But we're talking about options that are going into areas that were never designed for this type of collector road. Glenbrook was never designed. I've been part of up there. I was part of the Northeast Ratepayers Vice President, so I've been through the OCP, the neighborhood plans up there. So I've been here from the beginning of all this development up here. And Glenbrook wasn't ever put on the plans. So, we're shifting also. If you're here, your road was always designed as a collector road. It was always designed to go through and connect up. So while you're here and you don't like that, the options we're going to have is the same residents in the other areas coming up with their concerns about theirs was never even considered. So we'll have other people coming to us. And we also have to look at, through engineering, will come back and tell us what is the best transportation alternative for everybody on the mountain. But Mr. Jozaki and engineering will take your considerations in and look at them. But they will make the best choice and recommend that to council, and when we make that decision. But to my point there is, I don't believe that we look at the 950 homes, secondary suites, that's a reality. Hopefully they're legal, not non-legal suites up there. But we do need another access out of there and through that area. So Mr. Jozaki will look at it, but I don't think the traffic bombs that you're worried about. And I live on the bottom of it, where we get all the traffic, especially with the school. So we get more traffic where I'm at the bottom. The roundabout is at Gislace and not Roxton.
Certainly.
And it does slow traffic down, and we're going to use more of those in different designs up there. But I think the main traffic coming out of any area is going to come down Coast Range because of your most direct south route. People that are going to use the extension will be for other reasons, but I don't think you're going to see 950 cars in that area coming down Oxford from that area. They're going to use different routes. So, and that's my experience. I've lived before, and like I said, Sobel was never, at the beginning, ever designed to be, or moved into, as a collector road, which is it now. So
Yeah, our main concern, like I said, is safety before, so I understand what you're saying, and I'd hope that when you guys are planning these kind of things, safety is first and foremost. I even read my property tax information notice, and the second paragraph, first sentence says this funding provides for safe neighborhoods, and to me that means that that's the first consideration, and the movement of traffic would be number two.
well, and we have our volunteers that do out the traffic watch to go out and monitor for speeding. Then the RCMP, if there's a problem, they go out and they will set up things to do speedings. I think as Councillor Hodge mentioned, roundabouts do work by slowing down traffic, and they monitor the traffic. Curb bulges also works another way of slowing traffic at certain key areas. We have them on our streets, so there are design issues that engineering and staff can work with you. If it is finally chosen, we all have an open mind, but if that is the route, we will make sure that there will be safety enhancements put into the road if that would be the way. But that's up for engineering to come back to us, and they will look at your suggestions.
Excellent.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Great, thanks. Thanks for coming in. I have a few questions for, I guess, probably our engineering department. How would this stretch of Oxford compare to some of the streets on Westwood Plateau, like Parkway, Pine Tree, the upper part of Johnson, in terms of width and slope and curves and that sort of thing? I know I didn't ask this ahead of time so you could research it, but
Through the chair, given that we are meandering into some operational aspects, I'd like to call a friend.
I didn't want to ask Dan directly and offend you, but thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, in terms of the geometrics of the existing section of road, as Joseph mentioned, it was built to the collector standard of the day. So it's 11 meters wide. It has parking on both sides, marked center line with two-way traffic. The grades are consistent with our existing threshold, which is a maximum of 12%. One of the nice things about this alignment, the extension, is that it takes advantage of the topography in that area, in that it's a relatively flat area where basically along the contour lines and along the bank there, the section that is yet to be built is obviously something that we're going to be looking at for designs, so it would be consistent with our standards, certainly better than Thermal Drive and some of the others that were mentioned earlier. It would be consistent with or better than some of the ones up in the Westwood Plateau area. Traffic volume-wise, and there was a reference to the study on page 24 that talked about the need for arterials on the mountain. There is no need for an additional arterial up on the mountain, and Oxford Street, in our estimation, would be at the lower end of collector volumes in terms of traffic volumes, in the neighborhood of 2,500 vehicles per day, as opposed to the existing 950 vehicles per day, if that's helpful.
950 vehicles per day on which road?
Currently on Oxford Street, just immediately north of David Avenue, so at the very bottom of that photograph, kind of the maximum volume on the existing section of Oxford is currently about 950 vehicles per day. That's from the existing residents. At full build-out and with the connection through to Coast Meridian, so people will have an option as to which way they're going to go, the projected traffic volumes down again at that southern end would be in the range of about 2,500 vehicles per day.
Great. Now, you were talking about the extension from the end of Oxford north. I'm talking about the current stretch from the end of Oxford down to David. How does that compare to, say, Parkway, for example?
Again, the grades are in the, I believe it's 8 to 9% range. Our current threshold is 12% for a collector. There are a couple of curves which met the standard of the day then. Today's standard is slightly larger radius of curves. There are some things that we might want to consider through the S-bend at the bottom end to improve sight lines. Vegetation has crept out. Some of the hedging, we heard some stuff from the public meeting. Bayswater, for example, is the first cul-de-sac that runs to the west. There's a hedge on the corner property that's extended well out into the right-of-way, and talking to that owner about trimming the hedge back so that proper sight lines can be seen. There's an absence of curb bulges in that section. That would assist allowing motorists to pull forward and have a little better sight line up the roadway. We typically use curb bulges mainly for pedestrian crossings, but they do have an ancillary benefit of sight lines from side streets. That's something that we could consider on the existing section of Oxford. But Oxford is built very similar to Parkway and Collectors of its era.
And so I've heard the standard of the day a couple times. How does the standard of the day back then compare to the standard of today?
I would say we've come a lot further in terms of total multimodal. For example, separating sidewalks from the curb. The sidewalks along that section of Oxford are immediately adjacent to the curb. Our current standard pulls those sidewalks away from the curb, giving it more of a pedestrian feel. The lighting, more aesthetics of the lighting on the current Collectors. We have a wider right-of-way on our newer Collectors, so those types of standards would be implemented north of the existing section. The existing section obviously is constrained by its physical built, and we wouldn't normally go in and relocate a perfectly good sidewalk and pull it away from the curb. We also have right-of-way constraints, and people have landscaping and walls and vegetation. So we would accept that standard, and as I say, it's a standard consistent with many other roads that were built in that era.
And is the width of the actual road the same width as we would require today, or the same width as it would be north of where it ends right now?
I believe the actual nominal width is slightly narrower today, 10.5 meters, and I believe the existing is 11 meters. But we have 11-meter Collectors as well. One of the functions is public transit, and part of the reason for a loop connection like this would be for transit potential up in that area in the long future.
And a street like Parkway or the upper part of Johnson, would that handle about 2,500 cars a day now? Like, would it be a similar kind of traffic flow, or?
So Collector roads range from 3,000 through to 6,000 or 7,000 vehicles per day. And then beyond that, you need to look at an arterial standard. So this would be the lower range of a Collector.
Okay, and again, I'm just trying to be able to visualize, the comparison. Do we have any safety concerns right now on streets like Parkway or the upper part of Johnson or upper part of Pine Tree, Robson, like those main streets up there that are kind of similar to this one?
There are about 3,000, a little over 3,000 crashes a year in Coquitlam, and the issues aren't road design, it's driver behavior, and it's distracted driving, it's excessive driving, speeds, and so on, inattentive driving. So I would say that we have concerns for traffic safety throughout the city, but they're not really related to the road design, in my opinion. I think there's some things we can do in road design to help control the human behavior. Those visual cues, the roundabouts, some of those things to improve safety, education of both pedestrians and motorists. So I think, we have challenges, and there are safety concerns. It's something that we take very, very seriously, and we take a multifaceted approach. The engineering components, I would say, are a very, very small role in the cause, and also a relatively small role in the solution. It's really education and enforcement, but we work with our partners as best we can to address it.
And I know this has always been on the plans as being an extension. And because of that, I wonder if we really looked carefully at other options. Right? If this was always kind of in the plans when the North Burke Vision document was created, was there a strong assessment of other options other than this route?
I see I see our General Manager Jim McIntyre nodding. I see somebody in the back, so maybe somebody from planning.
We'll share the response.
You can share that? Okay, I thought it was a planning question. So.
we plan to share it.
Okay, plan to share.
So,
Are we going to use another call a friend? So.
from the engineering end, from the transportation planning end, not to a great depth, but we did look at alternatives. But as it was mentioned earlier, this sort of a general alignment has been established for a long time. But I'd like to bring another aspect to this discussion, and that is that should this area develop, we need to service it from the engineering perspective. And while on paper some of the alternatives look possibly attainable, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to provide gravity services for the sewers. And we do believe that with the alignment in broad terms, what we are looking at will actually accommodate not only the traffic, but also will accommodate some of the gravity utilities that we have to provide.
Services.
Can I just ask Joseph on a point of information?
Okay, I'm going to you next, but if
Just
Councillor
on a
Wilson's
quickie,
okay.
do you want to comment on the fact that, if I remember rightly, there's not very many driveways at all that are allowed to go directly onto Oxford? They're all the driveways are pretty well off Oxford, I believe, aren't they?
No.
Is there a few?
Are there no still?
No.
Oh, I thought they were.
It's average.
Okay, average? Okay, I thought they were less.
Yeah, and I was going to ask somebody, so do we know how many homes face or
Like all of them.
all of them? All of them face Oxford? I thought most of the side. So you have driveways.
All live on Oxford.
Okay.
All of our laneways come onto Oxford.
At cross streets, they face the cross street generally.
On the corner ones they face.
corners, okay.
On the corner ones they face the side streets, but in between they face Oxford. Okay, good.
Yeah, thank
Good,
you.
sorry, thank you for that. I was going to ask something similar. Councillor Wilson. Sorry, Jim, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. And just very briefly, as to the number of lots, I've got a street plan here that shows, I'd be eyeballing, but maybe two-thirds of that, the road frontage of Oxford Street going up the hill has fronting lots. The others would be the situation where you have intersecting streets and the houses are accessed off those side streets.
So they are. Okay, so it's a mix. So.
In terms of the Northwest Burke vision and the project manager, Steve Gawley's here, and he can speak to it at greater length, but that was one of the early steps we did is looking at potential road access into the study area. Anticipating this may be an issue with Oxford, though it's long been in the official community plan and the strategic transportation plan, but there was some initial high-level examination of some options, including going down the escarpment down to the Coquitlam River, and that's just not on. So that was considered, but this was in the plans, and this is certainly the most doable of the road connections.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, does that answer?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and I had Councillor Reid, I guess you've asked your question. Anybody else with any questions? Good. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming forward, for bringing forward the concerns and highlighting some issues. It certainly gives us some more to think about, and I saw our staff taking lots of notes as well. So.
Sorry, Chris.
Mayor Stewart.
One more, and I'm going to ask for your advice because we hear from lots of communities about the speed of traffic. In this case, 95% of the residents signed the petition because the traffic is too fast, and obviously those 95 also represent the people that drive too fast down the road because it's a dead end. It's a dead end. So everyone that signed the petition are among those that drive too fast. How do you suggest we would be able to calm the residents? The same in my neighborhood. They go too fast on the road. Once they leave their own road, they generally are on someone else's road and they go too fast. And we always look for advice as to how, is there some mechanism? One of them is curb bulges that narrows the roadway a little bit so that there's just 2 lanes of traffic. It makes it so the crosswalk is shorter, right, and people are safer. But how do we're always looking for ways to manage that risk.
Right, so the question is how do we slow traffic down?
Do you have any suggestions that we haven't tried or that might work specifically in this stretch? no matter what we do with the...
One comment on that as well, it's actually not just the residents. I live at the very top of Oxford, and because I'm outside a lot with, I have 2 very small kids, and we're out there, and I constantly see people burning up the top and turning around because they think it's a through road, because there's no proper signage. First of all, that it is a cul-de-sac at the top. There's one sign, but it's covered by a giant bush. So, yeah, I would be more than happy one day to sit out there and tell you the constant traffic I see of people thinking it's a through road, and they burn all the way up to the top where my house is, and they turn down. So to say it's just the residents is not true.
I'm not saying just the residents, but they're undoubtedly part of the problem. Yeah.
But what we've noticed is part of the problem, because the majority, pretty much everyone who thinks it's a through road speeds up that road. So our concern, again, is you're opening it up and all those people are going to zip up there because they do not care about our community. They're just getting up to their house. So I don't believe that it's the majority of the people in our residents. It's a lot of families, and a lot of people do follow the speed limit. It's the people that think that it's a through road and come burning up there. So I think it's not so much educating the existing residents of Oxford, it's what are you going to do to educate the 900s, the thousands of people that are just going to be burning through our community to get up to their house.
So typically when I ask a question like that, I get an answer that heads in a direction that I hadn't contemplated, and you're right, I'm looking at the Google Street View, there is no through road. So that sign doesn't exist.
No, there is a sign. It's right. It's probably this big, the sign, and it's like on a light pole behind a giant. But there's no indication that Oxford is a dead end. There's which it boggles my mind that
number one we can do.
Our city engineering department is saying that let's see if that does in fact reduce the traffic.
If I didn't have to work full time, I would love to sit out there and tally all the cars because you would probably be and I'm outside all the time, and I would not walk out of my house once and not seen the car come up burning up there, and then they burn back down. So.
But yes, I mean bulges are a potential mechanism that would slow traffic, improve signage as well, and education. Educate the residents that the city's looking at taking steps, and that in and of itself I think would help to slow people down. But keep in mind, I mean, there's 30 years ago, whenever Park Ridge Estates was built, it was built with one family, and now you've got all these cars on the side of the road for the renters that are downstairs in the basement suites, right?
And you also have multiple families living within a home now, not like that.
They're not supposed to park on the road.
Yeah, I think, and the challenges you outlined are challenges we face throughout the city. So we're aware of that, and it is certainly a challenge as we see the city growing. And
it's probably worth appointing a council member who has experience with traffic calming to perhaps look at the issue and see what...
Been there, done that. But I will I recognize that our chief of police is here, and when you mentioned about volunteering and looking at things, we do have our speed watch, so I think he's aware, and so perhaps he can pass that. Even though you are on a dead-end street, it sounds like with 900 cars you may have an issue there, and our first thing that our chief typically does is pass it on to the traffic department, who puts in our volunteers with their board, and they will be able to determine if there's a problem and further action warranted. So I think that you've made a comment about the signage. I saw our traffic engineering and department GM nod to that they're going to look into that. And the police chief, who's here on another matter today, heard your comments about the street, and I'm sure that will be passed back to the traffic department to see if there's any work that can be done. Even today, you deserve to have a safe neighborhood.
And may it go to bylaws as well to remove the boats and RVs and trailers?
And bylaws about what's being parked on the street as well. So some of those things I think need to be addressed immediately. So, and I'm sorry that the time's up, but I didn't give you a chance to speak. So if you'd like to provide the wrap up comment,
sure,
please.
I've lived there for 16 years. To answer the mayor's question about calming the traffic, I've made recommendations for speed bumps, and I've made recommendations for stop signs, particularly at Bayswater, and we've never had them. And my fear is during construction, we're going to have all the vehicles going up accessing the new site. It's not going to come in off Coast Meridian because I know the builders will build the cheapest way first. They're going to come right up our street. So we're going to have all of the heavy-duty stuff, traffic-wise, during construction.
Yeah, providing they...
And the noise and the pollution that goes with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's certainly something to consider as the mountains develop up there.
If you do have any input into the builders' scheduling, that's something that should be addressed.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mayor Stewart.
Just on that last point, we don't typically use stop signs as a traffic calming mechanism. There's a warrant that needs to be achieved to warrant a stop sign, and we haven't done speed bumps in residential streets for a wide variety of reasons, and largely it's because the residents themselves find themselves opposed to the speed bumps. But so that may answer why neither of those have been put in. We typically don't use stop signs to calm traffic. So.
Because it causes more accidents.
I like circles.
Yeah, but you like circles. And this is fortunate. The street may be able to accept circles. It doesn't work everywhere. There's very few streets that have the widths and the criteria. That's something that our traffic department can look at if this goes through. And that's why I made that comment that when you're looking at all the options, also look at options that if this route is selected, that it can be made safer.
We spoke with transportation. They actually confirmed at the info session that the traffic circles wouldn't work on the current stretch of Oxford, and so you'd be looking at things like bulges.
Okay. Good. Okay. Okay. Well,
Narrow.
Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for the information.
Thanks for your time.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, item 4 is the 2016 annual report, and the report is before you for information.
Okay, I'll turn that back over to the mayor. That's fine. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the report's before us.
Move recommendation?
Second. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill to receive the report. Any discussion? Oops, Councillor Hodge was first.
Yep, so I have a couple of questions on that. So my questions actually came from seeing the presentation, but it's information that's covered in the report. And I guess the one that I was struggling with is that we talk about the increase in value due to land sale, but because we're talking about total asset for the city, does that not just move something from one column to the other? Does, if the land value is sold, does the land asset drop by 70 million and the cash goes up by 70 million? So is that not just a transfer, or are both rising at the same time?
No, our land is valued at cost. So when we recognize a gain, when we sell something, we're selling it for a lot more than what we bought it for. So we're recognizing that gain, and that's where the land sale reserve is increasing through that gain.
Right. So, but then when I look at the balance sheet, land and holdings, and this is on your presentation.
Yeah.
It was, I think, slide. Well, it's on page 6 of my report. Balance sheet, tangible capital assets.
Yeah.
It says land and land holdings, 849 million. Is that then based on what we paid for that land?
Yeah, hang on a second. I'm just going to flip to the page. That's note 9 of our, on page 42 of the annual report. I'm just going to look and see what the holdings piece includes.
Balance sheet, tangible capital assets. Fortunately, the slides don't have numbers in the corner.
No.
So there it is.
So the land and land holdings, yes, so the cost is 825 million. So the balance of that 849 million, yes, that would be the cost.
So what we paid for it. So
yeah, however, where we have sold and recognized those gains, then that would be included in that.
It's not recognized until the land is sold.
That's right.
So the land of the City Hall that's sitting on the Poirier Rec Center is sitting on are actually valued at what they were in 1955, or in this case, well, I don't know how long we've had this land. The City Hall's only been here for 20 years. So you're saying that that's not really a true reflective value of what our city lands are, only
portions of it. Yes, that's correct. Yes. Just checking with my finance staff.
And we do the same on sewer, water, drainage.
Absolutely. All of our assets are valued
based on what it was when it was put in the ground, not at what would it be to replace it.
Yes.
Okay. And is it possible on the land holdings to, at some point, get an idea of what the market value is of those? Because I think that's an asset that we can sell, we can convert to cash. So because there's not something sitting on it, if that's rising with the market, I think it's important for us as citizens and our council to know that, hey, our land value has gone up by 20% or 30%. And I'm thinking just from personal financing, you look at your property assessment, you sort of say, wow, it's gone up this much, and of course then you complain about it at tax time. But you also, if you own other pieces of property, whether it's rental properties or vacation properties, you treat those differently because that's an asset you could sell or convert. And so I think that we have to draw a distinction between what's underneath our infrastructure and what has the potential to generate cash.
Absolutely, and I believe that the Strategic Initiatives, who manages our land portfolio, is going to be doing a strategic plan on our land, and Finance is going to be working very closely with them on that, so that we can do the modeling, the financial modeling behind that, and they're going to look at strategically where are those places that we should be buying and selling and utilizing our land in a much more strategic way. I don't know if Andrea wants to add anything, but that is coming forward, I believe, in the fall.
Great.
Yeah.
Richard's turn.
Just a second. If you could step up and grab a microphone, Ms. Toma.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's back and forth.
Hi, Andrea Toma, GM Strategic Initiatives. Michelle is correct. We are working on pulling forward all of the data, all of our land holdings, creating an inventory and bringing that to council so that it allows us to make decisions based on what we currently have, where we see trends, where we want to strategize and be in the driver's seat, and how we want to better manage our land assets.
Perfect. I'll look forward to that report. In the report here, on the item that we're now looking at, page 2, under financial results, it says that the city's tangible capital assets realized a net increase of $40 million, up from $1.82 billion to $1.86. That and the city's debt went down. Is that net increase of $40 million? That's just based, how did that grow? Was it just through sales? And was there any depreciation? Because that's total cash. So do we sort of each year depreciate the value of what we have?
Absolutely. So there was $85 million worth of additions, $40 million worth of depreciation or amortization, and then another $5-6 million worth of disposals where we actually, things like vehicles, where we send them to auction and that kind of thing.
Well, this is the difference between value increase, less depreciation. Our net worth, if you will, went up 40. Yes. But again, that's exclusive of the land portion of it. Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I thought maybe the report would come and go without anybody commenting or asking questions. So it's one of the reasons that I wanted to speak. I don't have questions, but I did want to make a comment that, I'm looking at how my insights into the way the city works have changed over the last 6 years since I've been on council. And certainly when I got to council, the sorts of questions that these reports would raise were the big questions that I had. And over the last 6 years, year after year, they keep being answered to my satisfaction. And I went through these reports, and there's not a single note I made to myself about a question I needed to ask, because I understand these now, and I'm sure most members of the public don't, though.
Takes a while.
And it's very difficult to explain to the public and what the conclusion that I've reached, that our finances are in excellent shape and are being managed really, really well. We've got big lineups of people, a lineup of people outside here lining up to pay their property taxes. I think they wanted to come in person because they know we have a new general manager as well, and they wanted to do a little homage to her. But that's and they're wondering where their money goes. I'd like to assure them it's been well managed. Start by talking about how things have changed over 6 years. As my concerns about the way the finances are managed have declined, it's clear that over the last 6 years, the issues and the questions about dealing with development and zoning and land use have become ever more important and vexing for us. The last 45 minutes just saw us dealing with one of the consequences of that. And that's where the real some of our real tough decisions have to be made going forward. There's still decisions to be made about finances and tax rates and everything, but we know that for 7 years now, our annual tax increase has gone down. That's what the public needs to know, that the money is being managed very well. We've got excellent reserves, and they're growing. We've got good plans. So this is in good hands. Our real work the council has to do in the years to come, certainly always keeping an eye on this, but land use and development and managing the growth and things like that. So just a comment I wanted to make. Congratulations on this good report.
Thank you. Thank you.
It'll take you 6 years to understand it.
I will echo that. The report, I think, any member of the public that even grabs the summary, but if they were able to get through the elements of the report itself, they would find both tremendous effort by city staff to manage the amount of information, to make sure the information is presented in as clear and concise a way as possible, but also a communications achievement, because communications does manage to decipher elements of things that quite often can be confusing, and we'll find in here things that even I understand. So I appreciate very much. No,
Must
really,
be really simple.
really simple. Yes.
Like a patio's outside.
The motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
With our thanks, yes.
Item 5 is the 2016 Statement of Financial Information, and the report is before you for information.
Move receipt.
Second. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Councillor Zerillo.
I just had a quick question on the disclosures, on the council disclosures, and I'm not sure if they're in this booklet or not. I don't think they're in this booklet. They might have just been in the emailed one.
They're here.
Came to us.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, I just wanted to take this opportunity.
Page 37.
Thank you. Page where?
37 of the
Take
report.
this opportunity just to talk about what might be that we had one to break out. Just an inconsistency in our travel policy. We have a very specific travel policy that's very simple, and I see that we've used the travel policy 3 ways. So I just wanted to put that forward. If staff could take a look at the travel policy. We had 3 different kinds of travel that happened, out of province travel, I guess specifically, that happened in the Sophies, and each of them was handled differently. I think in the travel policy it says we need a resolution from council, and I'm not sure that it happened in every case. So it's just an inconsistency that I would like to...
Sure, that's specific to the council.
Yeah, well, we don't have it breakdown here, but so the out of province travel for the FCM work came to a council resolution. There was another piece of travel, an international piece of travel, that didn't come with the resolution in the same way. And then we also had some travel out to another province, and again, each of them was handled a different way, even though the policy says it should be a resolution from council. So I think maybe we just need to either be more specific in the travel policy, or we need to handle each piece of out-of-province travel.
We can work with clerks to make sure that is looked at.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested in figuring out what that one is. Yeah, certainly.
I want to know what that one is too. So the FCM one, that comes to council.
That comes to council, and it'll come again tonight.
Okay.
And then the travel policy asks for every single out-of-province travel to have a resolution, and I'm not sure that we...
So it's just the regular FCM convention going. Is that what you're talking about?
No, she's talking about the FCM committee members.
Are you talking about the second type of FCM travel?
So the travel policy, and I'm sorry that we don't have it to share with everything, but the travel policy says that we need a resolution from council. It's pretty basic. It's a very basic one, but it does give us exemption to go to FCM.
Yeah, technically, I believe it's an FCM or the FCM annual or an FCM conference in lieu of the annual.
So it just says a resolution of council is required to approve a council member's attendance at any events outside of the province funded by the city, with the exception of an FCM sponsored event under section 1.1, which is the AGM that a number of us just went to. Now, last year I participated in the FCM standing committee, so I needed to get a resolution from council for that, but there was other travel that happened outside of the province
that didn't need a resolution?
Can we have some
International travel?
specifics?
Yes.
I don't know of any, so what are the specifics?
Regina, the council went to Regina.
And international travel, I think.
And then there was an international one too. So I just want to understand that
And what was the international one?
school
Asia.
district, yeah, a school district 43 one.
One
So
the mayor went on.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is, the policy might need to be changed because we're handling each of them differently.
Well, to be clear, my participation in the school district event wasn't funded by council. The participation in another related, not related actually, it was, council did that one by resolution, on economy airfare only, because that was the part that we needed. So there was a
I think
resolution.
she's asking if they go to open, is that what you're
Well,
asking?
I'm just saying each of them should be processed the same way, is what I'm saying. Each of them was processed differently. Each of them happened in a different way, and the policy is very specific. So there's either a gap in the policy or there's a gap in the way that we're handling it.
But you cited three different kinds. One of them, the city didn't incur any cost, and this only relates to the cost of the trip. It doesn't relate to permission to go. I also went on a Metro Vancouver trip funded entirely by Metro Vancouver and the Vancouver Port Authority without a council resolution because it's not funded by the city. The city's travel policy only relates to the reimbursement of costs. So it says reimbursement of costs out of province requires a resolution other than for an FCM sponsored event, one per year per councilman.
Right. So I'm just talking about the ones that were on the statement of financial information. I'm just talking about the travel that was claimed on the statement of financial information. Everything else is not our concern, but that one, there was 3 sets of out-of-province travel on councillors' financial disclosures, and I just want to make sure each of them is being handled in the same way, and if they're not, there's either a gap in the policy that we need to change or a gap in how we're reporting.
I think I had the floor.
Sorry, May.
But what I was trying to get, are you trying to get them to show differently? So someone would show $10,000 of expenses and $2,000 would be out of province and...
No, it shows that what I want to understand is everybody gets treated the same as it comes to out-of-province travel. And the policy says that we need a resolution from council, and I only remember a resolution from council on one FCM.
Richard.
Okay, well, Councillor O'Neill.
Okay, so I've done this a few times over the years for Councillor Zarillo, and I think I understand what she's saying. The resolution that is permitting her to participate in the FCM standing committees and get city expense covered is going to a full council meeting tonight and a full public vote. I think what she's saying is that she wants any other thing like that to go to either this shouldn't be going to a full council meeting, full council vote, it'd be somewhere else, or every other out of province similar trip should have the same. Is that what you're saying?
This is what I'm saying, but I'm trying to do it in a way that people don't get their backs up, but I just want it to be applied.
Specific. Okay, so I'm being specific. This is what you want. What you want is a special report that goes to council and a full open council meeting for us to vote on, because you're saying the other two didn't.
But I don't want that. I want the policy to go by the policy.
Everybody to be treated
If this policy is the policy.
I just want to understand you as well. Good, okay.
If I could ask, if anyone has any concerns about the way different things were treated, let's have a conversation this coming week, because I do want to understand. I don't think anything was, at least from my recollection, anything was treated differently from the point of view of the city's, the request that the city reimburse it. The only international travel expense, for example, that I believe the city was incurred was done by resolution of council in my case, and that was an economy airfare. But if there,
was it in
I have no idea. I can't remember it all. But but let's have a look at it and figure out make sure that we're all doing it consistently.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking. Is we have a policy, let's use it.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Motion is Sophie. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 6, pertains to the 2016 Development Cost Charges reports before you for information.
Am I back in chair or you?
Might as well leave it with.
Why don't you take the chair because I have...
Move recommendation.
Any second? Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, you had discussion? Mayor Stewart, you had a comment or question?
Not a spelling mistake.
Okay, never mind then.
Okay, see no other comments.
You can do it later.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
I hate spelling mistakes. Do it prior to the meeting.
Next item, item 7, pertains to the European Chafer remediation update. We have introductory comments by the General Manager. For you for information.
Welcome, Australia, on Chafer beetles.
Chief, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is just an update report on essentially our last couple of years dealing with the damage of the Chafer beetle throughout our landscape assets. I think as the report's indicated, there's really no magic bullet. There's some strategies to strengthen our resources, on the grass, etc. And there's some best practices that we're working on. We have highlighted that the work that we need to continue to do in this area, it's likely to mean that we continue to prioritize this, particularly on our important field assets, and that does mean some diversion of some existing operating resources, which we're doing, but in the long term, also the need for some potential for some enhanced resources just to continue to manage this. I do have Kathleen Reinheimer with me, Manager of Parks, and also Bruce Thiessen, who's our Landscape Manager, who can also answer some more detailed questions from Council.
Good. Any questions?
Let's get to the root of this.
Okay. Councillor Zarrillo.
Can I just make a quick comment? When Harborview Elementary was here, this is one of their questions that obviously they're hearing from their parents. So I just wanted to let you know, it's even flowing down to the kids in the community. How do we deal with the Chafer beetle?
Yes.
It was cute.
Good. Councillor Reid.
Yes, this has been a real big topic in a couple of places I've been lately. Do we send all this stuff out, like the stuff that we've tried and what works and what doesn't work? And
through the chair, you mean to the public in terms of what they can do?
Have it available?
Yes. Well, we've included some information in the report around what the private owners can do. We've got essentially that part of it is dealt with by environmental services, but we've got a whole web page dedicated to this. There's a whole brochure. We continue to support any resident that might have any questions on this. We direct them to nematode providers and also what they can do. It's just basic information on how to maintain and enhance their lawn. Short of that, it's almost hit and miss, but we do support them.
As pets, yeah.
Well, and as I think it's been stated in the past, all efforts can be made and to protect the lawn and do everything you can replace it, but next year it could come back because it just spreads from another property, and so but a strong lawn will be more resilient to this.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Last year around, I think it was around this time, there was a company going around spraying pesticide on a lot of people's lawns, advertising it, that sort of thing. It was last year, the year before, maybe now that I think about it. But have we heard any complaints or any comments about that happening this year?
Through the chair, I believe that those kinds of complaints or issues would go probably to environmental services and engineering. I haven't personally heard that. I think basically the word is out. There aren't as many landscapers who think that they can do that. Education has helped.
Okay.
And congratulations on your win on the weekend.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment? Okay. I don't need anything else. It's just for receipt only.
Oh, we got this one.
Oh, okay. Move. I need a mover. Moved by Councillor Searle, second by Councillor Stewart. All in favor? Oh, sorry. You had a follow-up question?
Yes, Councillor Stewart has a follow-up.
Yeah. Mayor Stewart.
At the bottom of page 4, it says the tall fescues grow in clumps, which leaves an undesirable surface for activities like throwing a frisbee. How tall are these clumps? But that's the facetious side of the question. But
I wondered about that.
are those the options that you say? One of the options are clovers and clumps. And I've seen, for example, English daisies and lots of other sorts of things. And here I am, a layperson trying to understand what the various options are.
Through the chair, yes. The tall fescues aren't as extreme as that, but they don't grow by stolon, so they don't spread. They stay relatively clumped, which means both they have more resilient roots, but they don't create that even footing that you need for playing on. But what the industry is marketing right now as part of the solution is a combination of clover, micro-clovers and fescues. And I think they're continuing to work on that, and we're getting better and better stuff. So I think the report's just intending to convey that we're trialing everything the seed producers are recommending for this, and none of them are quite, as I say, they would work just fine on a boulevard area or a park area where people don't walk across it a lot. We just want to keep it green, but if we want to have people playing and recreating on it, it's a little too uncertain at this point.
Well, that was going a perfect segue into the next question, was on that boulevard where we don't need anything other than the ornamental version of green. Yeah. Rather than to see so many people rip the boulevard up and plunk down something artificial and plastic, can we look at something that isn't as functional as far as the play aspects? I hate to see the boulevards absolutely ripped up and then the dirt's flowing down in the catch basins, and we're dealing with a whole bunch of new issues, not just the original one of ugly.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
So, and I always, as a kid, loved English daisies. That's why I'm pushing for English daisies on the boulevard.
I love daisies.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Anybody else? Seeing no further comment, it's been moved, it's been seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you for the report.
This report, item 8, concerns Canada 150 Mural Mosaic project. We have introductory comments by the General Manager. Report before you for information.
Okay, so this is something that's come up to us recently, and I just want to highlight for Council. We did talk about this last week. We did want to move quickly with some information to committee, and I'll talk about kind of the strategy if Council and committee would like to see this go ahead, and so we're kind of timing this at the same time as we're doing some of the community capital funding tonight for the Spirit Grant, so that would be an opportunity if Council wished to go forward with it. This opportunity really is, it's an interesting and exciting opportunity to participate in a national tile mosaic project. The Council is aware. We've put some of the information we have, some of it which was forwarded to us by Councillor Terry Towner. And the challenge with, I guess what we're saying in this report, there is some funding required to contract out with this specific group, and that's about $12,000 to $15,000, and that's their fee, that's their participation fee. We believe that given the time that we have, and we're still working to determine exactly when this group would want this to be completed by, we provided as much information as we had at the time of writing this report. We've highlighted two options to proceed. One would be a little bit more expedited to get this completed by 2017. The other would be a little bit of a longer process. We have included our public art policy just so Council's kind of aware of the process we generally tend to follow on most of the projects that we do, but all the projects that Council authorizes us, and we generally bring many of these forward as part of the budget process and as part of our requests. Some of these come at us at a different time, and I think we remain flexible to that opportunity. But we do find that from a resourcing perspective, there's still a concern that we need to liaise with this group. This group would come in and do a bunch of work. So they're contracted to do a particular amount of work. We do have to have someone liaising with this group and ultimately doing some coordination. And we've highlighted in the range of about $10,000, give or take. We've indicated, depending on whether there's two options, there's a larger mosaic and there's a smaller mosaic. So it would really depend. Again, what this is saying is that we think we can participate. We think that it can be done either in 2017 or 2018. There is a minimum of $12,000 to $15,000 fee that would be to contract this artist from Alberta to do the main part of the creating the tiles and coordinating of the bringing together the tiles here in a day. And some sessions here in Coquitlam, but there's going to be some additional resources required, and there's some staffing that's going to be needed. we're thinking in the order of probably, could be 70 hours, 50 hours. We're not sure. We're not really sure. We've been talking to this artist. We've also been talking to the Port Moody and Port Coquitlam to find out what their experience is. And they've highlighted, you do need to have somebody coordinate with this at an administrative level to a degree. We do have to have some contract work with them to bring them in, and then coordinating some of the volunteering, and then eventually putting this piece together and working some of that out. So there's a little bit in there that has to be provided for, and we believe that the council worthy to support this, and at this point we do have some resource issues in the events team. We've had a staff short for some time. We've got a lot of other projects on the go. Because of that, we have highlighted some resource needs, and we'd certainly love to incorporate this into our program budget as is, but that we're being challenged, so we believe that some contract work would be needed. Now, what that amount is, we're not quite sure. We'd like an upside amount, but we would work to reduce that amount depending on the amount of work that can be incorporated by staff. So that's essentially the essence of the report. Mary Morrison-Clark is here, who's done some of the work on this report. I think this would be a great opportunity for the city to get involved in another interesting national project. We've got another one on the go right now with our eco-sculpture and number of other things we're working on, but this would be another great complement, but we are looking for a little bit of resources from council to complete that.
Okay, I'll go to questions and just remind everybody that this discussion is now in open, so we'll stick to the report before us. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your preamble, because I was a little bit confused because I appreciate the report, but weeks ago when I came to staff about it, I never alluded to the fact that we as a city take it on. I just wanted to, how can we get to yes, right? And when I said the city, all we needed to provide was a space for it to happen, the funding, and where to hang it. When I said the city, I meant the city taking on the project. It was never meant as the city, as the corporation, the staff. So all the questions that I had about it were more, how can we do this and that kind of thing. And then I went out of town for 2 weeks. So I've been gone since last council meeting, last Monday. I've only been home hours and I'm on 2 hours of sleep. So I've got some notes here. I totally recognize that we have staffing resource issues. So I phoned and I've talked to 5 to 10 cities that did it. Half the cities handed over the key when they arrived, the troop, said, here's your basement, and they never got involved again. The troops did everything. There was maybe some social media or something to draw the public in to get it done, because there's, depending on the size of the mosaic, you need tiles painted.
Yeah.
That was it. Other cities chose to make it into a big thing and have receptions and, turn it into a bit of a community. If we have such resource issues, I know for a fact there are other organizations in our city that would gladly take it on, and they have a place to hang it. I was just hoping to get council support for the funding. It's easier to put it out to the community. Who wants to do this? Once in a lifetime, Canada 150, community-led, citizen-involved project, because our other Canada 150 art projects are fantastic, but they aren't done by the community. And so I just want to share with you some of the feedback I got. Some of them, they took the tiles out to seniors' homes and got them to paint, or out to schools, or got multicultural groups in. And they said, I talked to different organizers from the different cities, they said things like, it was phenomenal how easy it was. It was so worth it. It all came together. A bunch of immigrants in one city said they loved being a part of it. They didn't know English, but the artists were able to get them how to do it. So for example, there'll be a theme. I looked at New West's. It's beautiful. It's the orange Patella Bridge in the background and then the mosaic. Victoria's is Orca Whale and then the mosaic. So I don't know what Coquitlam's would be. But it just, apparently a lot of cities did it without council involvement, and council thanked them after because they're proud of this. So it came to me, being the community, the Canada 150 leader for FCM for Canada. I've talked to the other community leaders that I have contact information for. They would really like to see it happen. There's a buzz out there. Community groups would like to see it happen. So again, although this is, a good report, but there's no rush to get this done. Their initial goal for this project was 150 cities across Canada by July 1, and there's been such a huge uptake because they're so stunning that they're going to go well into 2018. And they started in 2016. They're not going to get them all done within Canada 150. So I just want to say, I would really like us, I think Coquitlam having this, it would be an outstanding, permanent, most of us aren't going to be around for Canada 200, the next milestone.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I'll be 99. I might be. So I guess that's all I wanted to say. I'm just hoping that notwithstanding the current process, we could contemplate using the funds from the Spirit Grant to fund it. And it's in line with our strategic goals on what we fund as far as community and celebrations and all that. So that's my spiel.
Okay, thank you. I've got Terry, I've got Brent, okay, Councillor Asmus, and then Councillor O'Neill.
Well, thank you for the report, and Terry, thank you for a bit of your highlights here. When I wrote the report, I didn't want to have staff taking on this project. We've got 3 Canada 150 projects going on right now. If somebody in the community wants to take this on and go do it, my issue is where we're going to put tiles. We did a project a number of years ago with kids painted tiles, which are on the hydro box, which have been vandalized. They've had issues with that one there. So if there's somebody in the community wants to take it on.
There is.
But I would try to find, my difficulty for us as a councillor coming up now after we've done our Spirit Grants and to take money out of that, there's a process that's involved that we make all the grant applications go through, and then we ourselves are going to circumvent it. So, and this is a public meeting, so I have some issues with that. I don't know what, if you're going to, staff has written this report, is that the amount of work that if they were to do it in 6 months, this is what it would take. From you, we don't know if it's 5,000, 10,000, what a community, because I'd rather see I would rather the staff not be involved with it. But if a community needs $5,000 or whatever, is there another fund or whatever we can allocate out of a budget or something else? But I don't think this has been brought up. What is a community group? What would they require to do this? Who in the community groups would be willing to take it on? And then, would we then through the staff research an area where we would want to hang a said mural? We'd have to do some analysis of that also. But I think that was the only part I would see staff being involved in. From your explanation, Terry, I think that's all you'd be wanting at the end of the day.
With space, money, and where to hang it.
Space at the city, remember, is a shortage.
3 days to do it.
Yeah.
How many?
But we can...
3 days, right?
3 days. They're just, you use the library somewhere else, the community center, to paint them up. Yeah. But I'd rather have it
Across the street.
rather than staff being involved just for the hanging of it. If whatever the...
They hang it too.
Yeah. But where?
Yeah.
That has to be decided where it's going to be hanged. But my thing was, what community, you've been in touch with some community groups, if they want to come forward, I'd want to hear who it is and what they think about it. Is it $5,000? What do they need to get all the supplies and everything and do it, right? I don't know that yet.
Well, it's $15,000 for the troop.
15,000. Yeah. That's what we have
for all the supplies and all the artists.
So that's all you're asking for.
Yeah. That's all I ever was asking for.
Okay, so is it possible to, because the Spirit Grant is coming tonight, put a placeholder in and then say the money is there if a group wants, because we've heard there may be groups that want to be involved. Is it possible then to just say there's money there and any group that wants to apply, they will be evaluated and awarded and be the partner, so we can put the money aside, turn it over to the best suited community group without turning that into a whole process. Is that an option to proceed that way? I think that's what Councillor Asmus is saying.
That would sort of close the loop a little bit better.
Close the loop, but say there's money available, somebody wants to take this project on, you can do it.
Yeah.
What's the number of 3 days? In kind.
I'm going to go to Ms. Vincent. Kathleen, I think Kathleen had a...
$17,000 then? How much is rental insurance?
Just going to have something maybe she can add to the discussion here. Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight, in terms of thinking of staff resources for this too, Councillor Towner mentioned just throw it up on social media. If we actually, the report I read said getting up to 400 participants. If we're actually trying to mobilize 400 people, I think it'll need more than just a post on social media. So when you're considering resources, consider that there would be an impact for corporate communications as well.
We could get 200 Syrians just like that.
Okay. One more than just...
You're right.
Yeah, so-
Councillor O'Neill next. Maybe Councillor O'Neill, maybe we go to him for some...
Yes, so I've got some refinement on what, different way of looking at them from both Councillor Asmussen and Hodge, but really along the same lines. So what I think that I agree that, first off, I don't think this is something the city should take on, and I'm glad that Councillor Towner said that's what wasn't her intent anyway. Let other groups apply and handle this. Every aspect of it then would be their responsibility, including social media, to get volunteers to do this. So I'm I'm of the same mind that this should be a Spirit grant. And I was going to suggest some extraordinary process through Spirit grant. We have a policy that we have 2 intakes a year. Whether or not we say have a placeholder or it's not really a placeholder, we just have a body of money available. I would certainly support, and I would want to see a group come forward with a plan. Well, here's what we want to do with it. Here's where we think some options where we can put it. If we get $15,000, we can do all of this, and then it goes through that process, that evaluation as well. Because that evaluation is important as well, because I don't really know, to my satisfaction, exactly who this group is. Are they federal government sanctioned? Is this a private group that's found a way to make a nice living for itself for the next couple of years, doing these murals? Is this a non-profit project? We don't want to support money-making projects. We don't support fundraisers. I'm not sure about this. That sort of analysis would have to be done. This isn't a federal government body. This is a private group of a team from the prairies somewhere. So let's not have anything to do with it other than as a Spirit grant. I'm willing to say have an extraordinary process for it, though. And that's my position.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Reid and then Councillor Sorrell.
Well, Councillor O'Neill just said all the things I wanted to say. I don't know who the people are that are trying to do this, but I don't mind the idea. I think it's kind of fun. I love to participate in it. It's Canada 150, so I don't mind having a place marker in the Spirit grant for funds to do this. But I don't really want to have control over it as a city in any way. I think we can find space for 3 days somewhere. You know, I have a spare room. Yeah. I mean, we're going to have to find something to do that. But other than that, I don't want this to take any staff resources whatsoever. So how you would initiate the process was the only thing that Councillor O'Neill didn't remark on. And if you sort of want to head this up, I'll certainly help you with it because it sounds like fun. But I think we have to keep it away from City Hall because it's just not something we can take on other than supporting the funds and maybe getting a group of people together. If you have groups, you know, I don't mind helping out with you and sitting, and maybe then we can figure out which group wants to do it and off we go. So there you go.
Hey, Councillor Cirillo.
Well, I can see that Councillor Towner is passionate about this, and this is one of the things that I actually mentioned at the beginning of the year when we had our council retreat, that it would be nice if we supported each other at least for one project that each of us feels strongly about. So I do like the idea of that. I would follow up on what Councillor O'Neill said is just around the ongoing, so operating budget going forward. We need to know what that is, and then also insurance around installation and even after the fact. So if it's going to go on public city property, those would be my areas that I'd be concerned about, and maybe there is an opportunity to do it with a private business, but I would support it just on the fact that she feels passionately about it.
Okay.
So Craig, did you add me back on the...
Sure. Oh, sorry. I've got Terry Councillor Towner. Anybody hasn't spoken for the first time? Mayor Stewart?
Yeah, actually, I talked to various communities about this kind of thing and about the specific ones because there's some really neat ones on the web page. I think it's I think it's worth the suggestion that Councillor, yourself and Councillor O'Neill made was let's at least earmark the funding that would allow it to take place if a community group wanted to take it on. I've also heard from one that is keen on it, and I think that there's a lot of synergies with that particular group, but let's make sure we proceed. I think just making sure that the funding is earmarked should be enough at this point, and then if it doesn't come to fruition, it doesn't come to fruition, but if it does, I think we'd be, judging from these, pretty proud of it.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Tanner.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I'm not trying to circumvent any process. I mean, I'm a process follower. So it just came to me, and I just felt the community brought it to me. They heard, that I'm kind of the Canada 150 person. And other cities out there were ahead of the game because they knew about it last year or the year before. I never saw anything about it. So those cities put it into their plan for the 2017 Canada, their public art. I don't know if we heard about it and we just didn't pursue it or didn't pique our interest, but it just came to me 3 weeks ago. And so I'm not trying to circumvent any process. And from what I've heard, I'm confident, and if we don't do it for 4, 6, 8 months, we have lots of time to rally volunteers and space and get it out there at the public end. We have lots of time, like if we know it's going to be the weekend of November 20th. So I really appreciate everyone's thoughts on this and concerns expressed, but I would love to see if we can do a motion to earmark some of the money tonight to make it easier for that community group to come forward.
I was going to say the recommendation is to receive the report. Do we need to modify that recommendation to place a placeholder? Subsequent motion.
I think I'd like to hear from Raul in terms of now that he's heard various commentary, what his perspective is, and if and when funding is provided, there should be some allowance for something other than the fee that is provided, because there's always some costs that come out of the woodwork.
I was going to say contingencies.
Yeah, so there's a couple of options that I see, and I think, thank you, Councillor Towner. I think what you've articulated is actually, it is really a community-led, community public art. It's slightly different rather than a hybrid project or specifically a civic public art project. So thank you for clarifying that. If it was simply a case in which we provided an allocation of funding, earmark this, and then a space, and then a place to hang it, I think something in the range of about $20,000 probably with the facility use license for 3 days and a little bit of insurance, and I think we could probably figure that out. So there's two options, I believe, that we could today allocate $20,000 under the Community Capital Fund for the Mural Mosaic project with staff then having to go back and potentially put out a public request for anybody interested, and we could bring forward a report for that grant separately out of the Spirit grant cycle, as I think is correct. So, and we could do that over the next month or two and see what we get, and we'll bring that back to council. The other option would be to wait for the Spirit grant in the fall. If this can be pushed into 2018, I'm not suggesting that. That is always an option. That would delay the project, which I'd rather not do. But in any event, it would probably be about $20,000 that we would probably just off the top of our minds, like I said, and we could bring forward a supplementary recommendation to tonight's council on the Spirit grant that would allocate $20,000 to this project with a direction to staff to then put out a request for groups that are interested in participating and pursuing that. Hopefully that reflects council's discussion.
Okay, I've got Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah, so I do want to do something tonight that allows for an extraordinary application to be considered in the near future. Yes. I do agree that we should maybe get a little bit of a messaging out that we want to know who's interested in taking this project on and applying for a Spirit grant to do it.
Okay.
But whatever, I don't want to prejudge and say that we're going to be spending $20,000 on this regardless of what we find out about this. Like any vote that we take tonight is not a guarantee that council 2 months from now is going to approve that grant. It has to come to us, and then we have to look at it with all the full details like we've done with all the other ones, and then say, well, actually this is exactly what we hoped, and we'll approve it, or we're going to say, holy mackerel, no, there's a bunch of stuff here that's not quite right, and we won't do it. but I just want to make sure that anything we do tonight doesn't tie our hands.
Subject to evaluation.
Mr. Stedman.
I would suggest you just refer to the process without the dollar amount. The dollar amount gets approved from the Spirit Grant process when it comes back. So you simply announce it tonight that you're interested in a separate standalone process. You're open to it, noting that the fee is such and such, and we're open to requests from the community
We'll let Councillor Towner,
without the dollar amount in tonight's motion.
We'll let Councillor Towner move that amendment, working with the general manager to get the right wording on that to reflect that. Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'm just, we've talked about the Spirit Grant, and there's a way to do it through Spirit Grant, but we could always do a grant that we just did one really for the High Creek, and we said, so we don't have to, as Mr. Sutherland, we don't have to identify the money, but we could take $20,000 out of our surplus or infrastructure and apply the money from there. We don't specifically have to take the money out of the Spirit Grant. Because we felt the High Creek, they didn't meet the criteria, but it was valuable to us to support them on some of their arrests, which is $10,000. So I think what we should do is that we said we want to support your request, like Councillor O'Neill said, with proposals coming in, and then at the time we will then find the funding at that time. And there's, I think we can take it from either pot, but we've shown that we can take a grant from the city through your infrastructure reserve surplus. $20,000 isn't going to hurt it at all. You got $3 million, take $20,000 out.
Cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I have
that's another option.
I have myself next on the list. I don't know. I agree, and I thought of the same example you had, except in this case, I think this could be a pretty good fit. It's community driven. I think that my preference would be not to start looking, but let's just leave the door open for it, and let's invite people to apply and see where it goes. So I think so. Okay, I've got Councillor Neal again.
So I think we need to go through the rigor of the Spirit Grant application. And at the end of that, staff says, well, it doesn't quite meet the criteria for Spirit Grant, so we can't formally recommend it. Then we can say, well, we might say, well, take Councillor Asmussen's suggestion. Well, there's another pot because we really like this. We know enough about it that we can support it like we did with High Creek. But it needs to go through that rigor first.
Yes. So for now, do we need to do anything, or do we just wait with direction for now and then make the formal amendment tonight? Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if the direction, and I in reading the table, what I'm taking away is the dollar amount is not required tonight. So what we'll do is we will work with Councillor Towner, who I believe the table is recognized as being the initiator of this request, to develop an amendment to tonight's resolution. It will be probably number 3. If we're doing a dollar amount, I would have said 1C in discussions with Parks and Rec staff ahead of time. But we'll work to get an appropriate bit of language to get us to the general agreement, and I'll have it moved tonight as part of the Spirit Grant report. That is item 3 to that existing recommendation.
So at this point, then, recommend just to receive the report, and everything else will be dealt with tonight. We'll ask Councillor Towner to take the lead on that. Good. Okay. Any further discussion? I think there was the motion made to receive the report. You moved. Second by Councillor O'Neill. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item 9, pertains to the 2016 Annual Drinking Water Quality Report. We have a presentation by the General Manager of Engineering and Public Works. Reports before you for information.
I love this report.
So moved.
Second. Moved. Second. Any further discussion?
Do you have water to drink?
All in favor?
Love it.
Any opposed? Great job. Excellent. Good job.
I'm slightly disappointed as I had 2 really exciting videos for your pleasure, but
can we see them on YouTube?
Yes.
We thought you were tapped out. I'm sorry.
Links will be provided later to that stream.
Sorry. Do we have an OB?
Okay. Do we have OBs?
I do not have any OBs identified.
Adjournment?
Second. Adjournment's moved and seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor? We're adjourned.
I don't know if I'll make it to the meeting.
5 or 6 minutes.